Welcome to SIM-PAC Live, where the rubber meets the road. I'm your host, Jeff Matthews, and today I interview Lex Forsyth, the director of Janus Electric. Janus Electric is a global leader in battery swap technology for heavy transport, and we're the first in the world to have commercial operations on the road. Welcome, Lex. How are you today?
I'm very well, thanks, Jeff. Thanks for having us on.
Good. That's good. Lex, Janus Electric, you're at the forefront of battery technology, battery swapping technology for trucks. And, the first question, Australian company, and how did you get there? When did you start looking at this technology? And give us a little bit about your background.
Oh, look, it was an interesting start. My co-founder and I ran into each other. I used to be a very large biodiesel customer when I was operating trucks myself. And Bevan, my other co-founder, built Australia's largest biodiesel plant, and I was his largest customer in Queensland. And anyway, long story short, about 15 years later, we've run into each other at a conference and got put in a group together and worked out who each other were, because we'd never met each other physically, but we'd spoken over the phone a number of times. And anyway, we got talking about decarbonisation and energy for trucks going forward. And I sort of said to each other, I got an idea for an electric truck, and I got an idea for an electric truck. And we said, well, let's go and build one. And so what we looked at it from, Bevan's background's a mechanical engineer. I come from the transport and fuel industry. And we looked at it from a process of how do we do something that can work very simply with existing technology, and how do we go about and build it and get something on the road. And so that was in September 2019, and we came back to Australia, and in the first month of 2020, we decided to convert the first electric truck, and we had a rolling prototype in I think it was April 2020. Started with lead acid batteries, then went to LFP batteries, and then realised we needed to take a U-turn and move it from a front mount battery to side mount batteries where the diesel tank goes. And then the rest is sort of history, and it's been a huge journey over the last sort of 3-4 years with the people that have come on board in the business. Our head engineer started with us from day one, and we've got some great people that have joined the journey as we've been developing the product and releasing the product.
So the product you've got available today for purchase, if somebody wants to come along and order one, I gather you buy in the truck's frames or something from the US. These are rigs that are made, and then you retrofit them here.
Typically, what's happening is the fleet owner brings one of their existing vehicles to us. We decommission the diesel engine out of it. So most of the fleet operators are looking at it when the truck's due for a diesel engine rebuild or at a second stage in life. So we do the decommission of the diesel engine, and then we put in our Janus conversion module, which is our 540 kilowatt motor coupled to a gearbox transmission that then goes directly in where the diesel engine comes out of, and we have our different systems on top of the JCM that we, new air compressor, power steering pump, water pump, those things that basically give a crate motor scenario for an electric motor and gearbox package. We convert that into the vehicle. We put on our side receptacle where the batteries go into, and then obviously we've got the battery technology that we developed and the charge station technology that does the recharging of the batteries, and then also the software platform that then sits over the top of that and manages all the transactions that are happening in the ecosystem for the electrification of heavy vehicles.
And you've had a couple of, I would call them sort of getting on the long to medium-term trials, some 24-month, 12-month trials out there?
Yeah, so, some of the trucks, the first commercial truck that was out to a customer has now done in excess of about 55,000 kilometres, 250 battery swaps. And that we've had trucks on the road for the last 2.5 years. The first batch of those were Janus trucks, so they were our test trucks that we were validating technology and learning what we didn't know, and then that's led to the development of the commercialised product that we are now offering to the market.
And the idea, I know that charging stations are getting faster, and they're building them that there's fast charging for trucks. But you need a huge amount of infrastructure grunt to make that happen. And that means infrastructure to the grid, as well as you may even need batteries to be able to deliver that much power in that quicker time. And obviously, there's lots of Australia and other places in the world that are remote from these sort of connections, grid connections, to be able to deliver that much power. So battery swapping will be, or should still be, a really important part of this mix, even though that fast charging is getting better.
Yeah, look, fast charging is one thing, but the reality of fast charging is it's not friendly to the battery chemistry, and you need an enormous power feed to be able to do it. So to fast charge one of our batteries within 20 minutes, you need nearly a 2 megawatt feed. Well, they're not something you can get off the shelf. And the reality of it is then how do you, I was talking to the head of truck stops for Shell in Europe. And they said, we don't know how we're going to recharge these fixed battery trucks, because we can have anywhere between 500 to 800 trucks a night sitting in one of our truck stops. He said it's just physically, logistically impossible to build that amount of infrastructure, because they're saying, oh, well, you just charge it when the driver's having his fatigue break. Well, you can't have 800 points in a truck stop and just charge it without moving vehicles. So, we see battery swapping as an integral part of the decarbonisation and zero emission strategy for road transport and Class 8 trucks. And we see it, the other side of it is we look at is, why duplicate having a static battery there to go into another battery? Why not just swap the batteries and have the best of both worlds? Have a truck you re-energise in less than a minute once we go to our automated swapping scenarios, and then have that battery there available waiting to take charge when it suits the grid, so that you're not putting a burden on the grid infrastructure as well, and better utilise our grid infrastructure. I mean, common grid infrastructure around the world is underutilised on a massive scale, because of the way we consume power as humans. It's only a peak power for about 25 to 30% of its full capacity, and then the rest of the day it's underutilised. So it makes sense of how do you bring it together and get best utilisation.
While they're stationary, could actually be earning you money by supplying services to the grid.
Correct. Exactly. That's, we look at our charge stations. We shouldn't really call them charge stations. We call them battery energy storage systems, because they're able to invert back to the grid, and then also come out and we swap the batteries. And the great thing about our solution is we're not reliant on the grid to have a revenue event for energy to go back into the grid. We're the only solution that takes energy from the grid and utilises it outside of the grid to then give an empty storage receptacle back to take more energy from the grid. Yes. So in our sense, it makes a lot of sense.
Yes, because my researcher and I crunched some data a month ago, and I've said this in other podcasts, that 90% of all the batteries on Earth will be in electric vehicles. So you can't have the 10% topping up the 90%. It doesn't work.
Correct. It doesn't work.
And so in any grid, looking out there, if you're a grid operator, 90% of your battery storage is in other people's vehicles moving around, or like yours, stationary and ready to be used. So it's obvious that that's got to be a resource that the grid can use. And it also means you can suck up all the excess power when it's at negative pricing or zero pricing, and that makes an even larger incentive to convert and to decarbonise quicker.
Yeah, that's correct. And it's about, having storage available when renewable energy is in production. And the beauty of this is you've got to look at it like a transition. We can't there's no magic switch that can be flicked to do this. It's a process of time, and you've got to create a market and stable demand for renewables to actually have a growth strategy and enable for more investment into renewables, because there's no point in putting more renewables into the existing grid that can't handle it now. You've got to be able to manage storage and look after it and be able to take energy when it's available. The thing I look at and I explain to people, I said it's like a service station. There's not a magic line that runs all the way back to the oil refinery that pumps the diesel down it. They have storage tanks. So the big thing we've looked at is how do we have a storage tank scenario that we can also utilise that storage tank to go onto the vehicle, and that's the reason why we've gone with a swap and go battery model. Yeah. No, and also the retrofitting. We can't rebuild. The planet doesn't have enough resources to rebuild all of the vehicles in operation at the moment. Yeah. And this end of life, diesel life, is we need to be taking the worst polluting engines off the road. That's the number one thing. And the least efficient engines and the worst polluting off the road.
this retro fitting of them now, it's making good use of the available resources, and it's the fastest way to the energy transition.
Correct. And look, the reality of it is the OEMs can only produce 5% of the 5% of the truck market as a replacement. So the reality of trying to hit 2045 or 2035, depending on which country you're in, 2030 or 2035 targets or 2050 targets, it's fast approaching near impossible because they cannot build enough vehicles. And if you're looking at the Australian fleet, it'll take 20 years to replace the Australian fleet from new. So yes. The other side, your point's very valid around zero emission, around the worst polluting vehicles as well too. You've got Euro 4 and Euro 5 trucks that are still in operation because the average age of trucks is up to 13 years of age. So when you look at that scenario, trucks are not being replaced every 5 years with the latest emissions technology. They're operated over many life cycles, typically 2 to 3 diesel engine rebuilds. So instead of doing the diesel engine rebuild, do a replacement, do the conversion, and take it to zero emissions and get rid of that more polluting motor out of the vehicle sooner.
Yes. And you're also offering battery rental. So if somebody does that conversion and they don't want to invest in their own batteries, you rent these. And I saw some pricing off your website saying I couldn't believe how cheap it was, actually.
It's about cycling the asset. So, one of the things we're mindful of is that the fleet owners don't want to be fixed into one technology. So when you buy a fixed battery electric vehicle, you're stuck with that cell chemistry you buy with that vehicle. So if it's only got 300 kilometres range, that's all you've got for the life of the vehicle. Whereas with our solution, as new cell chemistry comes available, we can put that into our form factor, and you've got the latest extension of range or reduction in battery weight to increase payload. So it's about giving the fleet operator flexibility. And the other side we see is that there's a second market for these batteries, not in trucks, in grid storage and static FCAS markets, those sorts of things, grid stabilisation, emergency response. You imagine with our battery charge stations that have got a 250 kilowatt inverter, charger inverter in them. You deploy one of them out to a disaster zone, and all of a sudden you've got 2.5 megawatts of energy there with a 250 kilowatt inverter inverting back into the grid that can help support and stabilise the grid in emergency areas. Backup generation, removal of, putting these in as grid peaking to help stabilise your power price and your interaction with the grid. So there's a lot bigger market for the batteries outside of transport after they've reached a certain life through transport. So that's been our primary focus of how do we give that flexibility to the fleet operator, and then have an asset that can be utilised in multiple times in a 24-hour period. So,
I was on a chat show with somebody recently. We were talking that in the future, your car batteries will be plug and play into your house. You'll use your old car battery and that'll help your household. No problems at all. It'll have another life.
We had our head of procurement. He's got a private power pole on his property, and with a storm in Sydney last week, it fell over. And he drives a BYD, and he plugged it into his house and still kept his fridge and everything, fridge and freezer running, and a base level of power whilst he got the power pole replaced. So this is that's on a smaller scale. I mean, our system is quite large scale once we start to build it out into large areas.
There was a moment that I thought the American market would tip towards electric vehicles, and it was when they brought out the F-150 Lightning, and they as their advertisement, they said it could power your house for 3 days. And to me and also power all your work tools and all of those sorts of things. And all of a sudden, that was a moment I thought, this market's going to tip really quickly and get rid of those old diesel burners and things. So now, as a company, you're expanding, and expansion always takes capital. And I believe you're in a capital round. You're in a raising round.
Yeah, we are in a raising round at the moment, and proceeding ahead with a couple of interested parties in coming in and investing into the business to help with the expansion and growth of our manufacturing capacity. We also have some battery investment available for people to own batteries and have them operated in the pool. So you can own a battery and get a return on your battery in the pool utilised by transport businesses. So there's a number of different systems and investment pieces that are available at the moment within the business.
Yeah, and it's okay in that market. You're not seeing all the capital flight to the USA at the moment. That I know there's a bit of debate about their Inflation Reduction Act sucking out a lot of talent and a lot of money too in that direction.
Yeah, look, the capital markets in Australia have been extremely tight, and I think that's partly due to the economic environment and a little bit of uncertainty around different scenarios here in Australia. But we've found some parties that are interested in being potentially a customer at the same time as well. That are wanting to put their money where their mouth is around their decarbonisation strategies, and we're seeing a more impact from investors that can see the value add to their businesses and how it can complement their existing businesses. Yeah.
And if you're going to make that step, why wouldn't you invest in a company helping you deliver that?
Correct. That's exactly it. They see it as a step change in their business, and it's great to see them participating the way they are.
Yeah. That's wonderful. And so the next 24 months for you sound like you're going to be flat out and busy, keeping going, full steam ahead.
Yeah. Look, we're proceeding ahead. We've got more orders than we can physically build at the moment. And that's one of the reasons why we're in a capital raise. But we'll see close to nearly 150 to 200 Janus trucks on the road over the next 2 years. So we're in step to do that. We've also rolled out another 2 charge stations and slowly growing that network and the battery network as well too. Yeah.
Awesome. Look, thank you very much, Lex. It was great chatting to you. Good luck, because I know when you first started going, you were actually ahead of the game globally. I think, were you one of the first to get battery swap technology out there?
Yeah, we were. So we've been leading this from the get-go, and I think we'll continue to lead with the way that we're doing it. I think it's we've got a very revolutionising product, and the fact that the ecosystem's there and it all talks to itself, and being able to understand when trucks use energy and how they use it and where they use it makes it really powerful when you're looking at grid infrastructure and being able to manage demand loads and those sorts of things, and being able to have some control over the way you interact with the grid is a big step forward for the industry.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. We look forward to having you at SIM-PAC 2024. I've got you down as the speaker. I'm excited to have you there.
We're looking forward to it too.
Yeah, and I think I just love what you're doing. I think it's fantastic. It's what we need as Australian companies going out, leading the world, and it's great to see. And I hope that you're as successful as you hope you are too.
Thanks very much, Jeff. Appreciate your time, and thanks for having us along.
Thanks, Lex.
Thank you.